Heidi, the other development today, and it was just before the hearing began, was the release of the whistleblower's report itself. I mean, I'm looking at it in just the first few lines where it says, "I have received information that the President of the United States is using the power of his office to solicit interference from a foreign country." It's damning right from the outset.
That's right, and it's very all-encompassing because not only does this whistleblower, who remains anonymous at this point but is said to be an intelligence officer, not only does he detail the contents of this call between Trump and Zelensky, but he also goes on to say how this call was only part of what appears to be a months-long effort by Trump, mainly through his personal attorney, Rudolph Giuliani, to groom the incoming Ukrainian administration to heed Trump's call to investigate his political opponent. And if you'll allow me to go through this timeline just a little bit, in April is when Zelensky won the presidency in Ukraine. 8 days later, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine was mysteriously recalled. According to the whistleblower who spoke with senior administration officials, it was because that ambassador hadn't fully bought in to the idea of this investigation of Joe Biden and his son. Soon after that, Giuliani continued his face-to-face meetings with other leaders in the Ukrainian presidency, in the administration, and the whistleblower was led to believe that Ukrainians thought that they had to play ball with this call to investigate Biden, and that the only way that Zelensky would receive a phone call or a meeting with Trump was if he played ball with this request. In June, Zelensky was apparently still silent. Giuliani tweeted his unhappiness about that. And in July, that key decision by the president to temporarily withhold almost $400 million in U.S. military aid to Ukraine. A few days later, July 25th, of course, came that call that we've all read about. And it doesn't end there. After the call, according to the whistleblower, Giuliani, again, the president's personal attorney, a private citizen, not a government representative, continued these meetings with officials in the Ukrainian administration. And while he did that, people in the White House initiated a lockdown of the records of the call between Trump and Zelensky, moving those records from its normal system to a very classified, secretive system reserved for the most classified national security secrets. And in the words of the whistleblower, he heard that this was not the first time that a presidential transcript had been moved there solely for political purposes. So a lot of worrisome information there that Democrats are certainly trying to get to the bottom of. All while this is happening, Republicans are still saying, for the most part, that all of this is still a charade. Come on.
Heidi, as we watch the hearing continue whilst we're talking to you, it just makes me wonder, well, first of all, how long it's going to go, and I guess we don't know that yet, but then also what happens after that? Will we be hearing from the whistleblower themselves at some point in some way?
That is a huge question. We've heard that the whistleblower wishes to continue cooperating with Congress, but at the same time has said that he wishes to remain anonymous. So how can that happen? Well, right now he's communicating with committee members via his attorney, and perhaps they are discussing a future confidential closed-door testimony down the road. We don't know. Another person that the Congress wants to talk to would be the Inspector General himself, who reviewed the whistleblower's complaint and who reportedly interviewed corroborating witnesses within the White House before deeming this complaint as valid, or at least as having merit to be investigated. We also know that this complaint was forwarded to the Department of Justice as well as to the FBI for a potential criminal investigation of the president's actions, that after only a few weeks and without interviewing any witnesses, the Department of Justice decided not to prosecute. And to complicate even this more, the leader of the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney General William Barr, he himself is implicated in the whistleblower report. His name was brought up by Trump as someone that Zelensky should speak with to initiate this investigation of Joe Biden and his son. All of those individuals, certainly, I'm sure, Congress would like to speak with. And of course, Rudy Giuliani himself, the man whose name continues to come up in this hearing, the president's personal attorney who appears to have been acted as the fixer in this situation between Trump and his call for Ukraine to investigate his political opponent.
Okay, Heidi, thanks for now. We're going to go back to Chairman Adam Schiff now.
That what they would be treated to by the President of the United States would be the highest form of corruption in this country. That the President of the United States would be, instead of a champion of democracy and human rights and the rule of law, would instead be reinforcing a message with the new Ukrainian president who was elected to root out corruption, that instead the message of that president would be, you can use your Justice Department, just call Bill Barr, you can use our Justice Department to manufacture dirt on an opponent. That's what democracy is. You can use foreign assistance, military assistance, vital assistance as a lever to get another country to do something unethical. The idea that a fellow democracy, a struggling democracy, would hear those messages from the President of the United States. I just want to say to the people of Ukraine, we support you in your fight with Russia. We support you in your struggle for democracy. We support you in your efforts to root out corruption. And what you are witnessing and what you are seeing in the actions of this president is not democracy. It is the very negation of democracy. This is democracy. What you saw in this committee is democracy, as ugly as it can be, as personal as it can be, as infuriating as it can be. This is democracy. This is democracy. I thank you, Director. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, the hearing is adjourned. The House Intelligence Committee, chaired by that man there, Adam Schiff, who has ended the proceedings by saying this is democracy, as ugly, as personal, as infuriating as it can be. This is democracy. He had previously, in speaking to Director of National Intelligence, Acting Director of National Intelligence, Joseph Maguire, who said no person in this country is beyond the reach of the law. Adam Schiff said, well, that's the way it should be. I'm trying to figure out if that's the way it is, as a practical fact. Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. Welcome to this continuing coverage on Al Jazeera. For the past, well, over 3 hours, we've been watching that hearing on Capitol Hill, relating, of course, to the whistleblower report, which was released just before the hearing began, in relation to conversation between Presidents Trump and Zelensky of the Ukraine. Heidi Castro is our correspondent on Capitol Hill today. Heidi, you've been, as we have, listening to the whole thing. There's been a lot to take in. What's been the most important thing, I guess, for you that you've seen to relate to our viewers?
Well, sure. Maguire was very adamant. He said that he believed the whistleblower in this case did the right thing, in his words, and he said that he believed that the allegations within this complaint were valid and were credible, which is why he sent them on to Congress. Now, he has a very interesting role in all of this because he describes himself as nonpartisan. However, he's only had this job as acting National Intelligence Director for 6 weeks, and he was appointed by Trump to this position. And he was very vague in answering the questions of Democrats who wanted to point out that there may be a conflict of interest here. They asked him, why did he take the whistleblower's complaint to the White House and why to the Department of Justice, the two entities that were really implicated in the report? Because, of course, if you'll remember, it's President Trump and his interactions with President Zelensky that are under examination. And the whistleblower pointedly said Attorney General William Barr, who is the boss of the Department of Justice, is involved in this too. And it was those two men, in essence, who were able to decide whether or not to release the report. It's interesting that they agreed to do so, because just before this hearing is when we got that 9-page report, which documents not only what happened within this call between Trump and Zelensky, but also the months-long apparent grooming effort undertaken namely by Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, to convince the incoming Ukrainian administration to help Trump dig up this dirt on his potential political rival, Joe Biden. So all of that happened just before the hearing. It gave the Democrats so much material to really dig into. However, Maguire, the acting national intelligence director, he was very careful with his answers. He did not pass judgment on the president. He pointedly refused to say whether or not he thought that this call with Zelensky amounted to presidential wrongdoing. In fact, he even would not answer whether it concerned him. Obviously, we're hearing very different reactions from Democrats. Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, said this was a flagrant abuse of power. And in fact, this does give her more the ammunition that she's seeking to continue her efforts in this impeachment inquiry. Kamal.
He was under some sort of pressure, though, in the seat, wasn't he, Heidi? And I think this is one of the fascinating things to watch. And it was Adam Schiff who said, you know, this is democracy, as ugly as you like it. But the different lines of questioning from Republican and Democrat members of the committee, you know, it's almost like they were arguing two completely separate things.
They were, but there was one point that stood out to me. It was which one of the Republican congressmen actually said. He said, I don't think this conversation was okay. He was referring to the call between Trump and Zelensky. And that was one of the few times we've seen a crack in the otherwise very solid Republican backing behind Trump. And it may be indicative of something happening, though it's much too early to say. Beside that comment, really only two other Republicans have come out to openly criticize Trump's actions. That was Mitt Romney, who is known to be critical of Donald Trump. And at this point, though, if you look at the polling for average, everyday Americans, it doesn't say that the public is supporting this impeachment effort. There was a Quinnipiac University poll that just came out yesterday, which surveyed people before the transcript for the call was released, but that still found that the majority of Americans do not think Donald Trump should be impeached. And of course, it falls under starkly partisan lines, with only 4% of Republicans saying that the president should be impeached. So the bigger picture context of all of this, I know everyone is wondering, will Donald Trump be impeached? Will he be removed from office? This still doesn't change the fact that Republicans control the Senate, and any conviction, removal of office, would require 2/3 of senators to convict Trump. And at this moment, that is simply still not going to happen.
So in the short term, Heidi, what happens? It's all very high drama and very tense as you watch these hearings. Then suddenly it's adjourned. What actually happens next?
Well, there's still a lot more information to be dug up. There are many witnesses that Democrats are still hoping to hear from. So as they march steadily through this impeachment inquiry, which will then lead to consideration of articles of impeachment, which is actually what officially launches the impeachment process, they will be trying to speak with possibly the whistleblower himself in anonymous conditions, most likely behind closed doors. They'll probably try to speak with the intelligence community's inspector general, who vetted that complaint, who spoke with the whistleblower, and reportedly also interviewed other White House officials to corroborate those allegations. Those people haven't been heard from yet, nor Rudy Giuliani, who's the president's personal attorney, and apparently the go-between person between Trump and Ukrainian leaders. Giuliani's name is all over the whistleblower's report, and he came up multiple times in today's hearing as well. And apparently a process that he undertook that is continuing even now, but that began months ago, as he tried to groom the incoming Ukrainian administration to do Trump's bidding in getting this investigation of Joe Biden, which at this point we've seen no evidence of any corruption involving the Bidens in Ukraine. But he wanted the Ukrainian government to help Trump dig up this potential political dirt on his opponent, and that's the bigger picture of all this. Are Americans going to be okay with what appears to be the president trying to lobby a foreign government for a reason, for his personal gain at the possible expense of national security by withholding, at least temporarily, that $400 million of military aid to Ukraine? And that is what led this whistleblower to come forward. That's what led many Democrats who just jumped on board with this impeachment inquiry to say that was the red line that has been crossed.
Heidi Joe Castro is on Capitol Hill following the events there at the House Intelligence Committee hearing. Thank you, Heidi.